Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Advait here. You're one of you're the creator of GoGuardian. It's a platform that's been helping so many different young people ensure that they have the proper type of educational experience, and you've been really beneficial in creating this tool that's helped tons and tons of schools throughout the U.S. And it's I think nearly one in every two students right now are using it throughout the country, and it's helped so many people ensure that they can really learn and really grow in an environment that caters towards them. And now you've stepped into a bit of a different position. You will focus on AI and also increasing what you guys can do with this platform. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks so much, Ben. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So where did your passion for entrepreneurship, business leadership, education kind of begin? Like, was this something you always had when you were young? Like, how did this passion start?
I think it really emerged as a relatively young kid, probably middle school, high school. I had the fortune of sort of growing up in the early internet era, and just to see how rapidly the world was changing around me, and how much potential that the internet represented in terms of how easy it is to build something, relatively speaking, and how straightforward it is to get access and distribution to millions of people worldwide. I was just completely enamored with that. I also just love computers in general. And I learned how to program as a relatively young kid. And yeah, just to see the rapid pace of change was just so exciting. I knew as a young kid that I wanted to be in this space. I wanted to do something online. I wanted to build something. And I didn't really know what it was. And it was a sort of unexpected turn of events that ultimately led to starting GoGuardian. But as a really young kid, I knew it was something I wanted to do.
Mhm. So how did you kind of take the steps to like prepare yourself to create your first business? Like, how did you get GoGuardian? Eventually also, how did you kind of get GoGuardian off the ground?
Our mindset as founders of GoGuardian was really, really modest. I don't think anybody on the team really expected the project to amount to much. And certainly from my perspective, my mindset was, well, statistically speaking, most startups fail. And so this would be like a 6 week to 6 month project. And I'd get the experience of sort of being in an early stage company and going all in on something. But the worst case scenario for me would be to move back up to San Francisco and get a job maybe at Twitter as a software engineer. And so having that as my worst case scenario was super helpful, honestly, in the sense that it allowed me to just fully devote all of my attention and energy to this project. And surprisingly, we found product market fit really, really quickly and grew to $1 million in ARR within our first 6 months or so of operating. And obviously, it's been continuing to grow and snowball since then. So it's been pretty crazy.
Hmm. So how did the idea kind of come about, even in the first place? Like, how did this idea form?
Yeah, so we started the business formally in 2014, and this was right around the time that school districts were starting to put devices in the classroom in a way that was really different from the computer lab era that preceded it. So every kid was getting a laptop, and the intention was more and more of the educational experience was starting to shift online on these devices. And as founders, we looked at that. We were super excited about the internet becoming more central to the educational experience because we ourselves were internet kids, and we felt that so much of our personal learning and excitement about the world came from the internet. And so the idea of that becoming more central to everyone's educational experience to us showed so much potential. Like we could not only use so much of the amazing content available online, but we could use the data that resulted from digital interaction to really understand how learning works and be in a position to optimize educational experiences, not just from an engagement perspective, but also from an effectiveness and outcomes perspective. And to the extent that this sort of pattern of digitization really revolutionizing industries was pretty standard in basically every other vertical, it hadn't yet happened in education. And we felt that that sort of um, the change that was inevitable as a result of digitization was inevitably going to happen to K-12 too. And so we felt that we kind of had this really interesting opportunity to be early in this story, and we just wanted to play whatever role that we could in it. And so that was the beginning. It actually happened as a consequence of school districts reaching out to us and saying, hey, like we brought all these Chromebooks, like we would love to use some of the software that you all have built to track them if they get lost. And it turns out that there were many, many more needs beyond just tracking devices, but in particular, ensuring that kids are having a safe and productive experience online, because as amazing as the internet can be in a learning context, it can also be distracting in many instances and outright harmful for young kids as well. And so this sort of delicate problem of ensuring that kids are having a safe and productive experience online through these conversations with school districts became very, very clear that this was a very pressing need. So that's where we focused on in the early days. And again, we kind of timed things really accidentally in a perfect way. And it truly just snowballed from there.
So there was just a need that you saw for, for some sort of, for like really a tool in the space that could help educators ensure that there was a proper experience being done. You just didn't see anything. Did you kind of experience this on your own too? Like, kind of through some of your educational experiences, like, did you think that this was needed as well?
Yeah. So in the computer lab era, when you're using a computer for maybe 1 hour a week, it's not the worst thing in the world if kids figure out how to bypass all of the protections in place and just play games. And certainly as a kid, that was me. I was constantly on school computers playing games and things like that. But as these devices become more central, so that you're on them for most of the day, as well as at home, the sort of stakes are much higher. And so if the protections that are in place aren't really working, then kids can get distracted or outright harm can happen to them, right? And so we knew firsthand that this was going to be a critical thing that needed to be in place. And through conversations with school districts, we realized that many teachers were actually really frustrated about the fact that the technology was becoming more prevalent in the classroom. They kind of felt that it was being forced on them because they didn't really have visibility or control over the devices. And so a lot of them were telling us, like, look, I don't want anything to do with this technology. Like just a year before introducing these devices, like I had full control over my classroom flow, but now I have to walk up and down the aisles, and it's clear that students are alt tabbing away from the games that they're playing, and it's just not helpful from an educational perspective. And so we looked at many stories like that, and we felt that it would be a real tragedy if, of all people, that teachers really weren't excited about technology. And we felt that the first thing that needs to be in place is that instilling a sense of control in the minds of teachers that they can actually use these devices productively in an educational context. And so that's where we focused in the early days.
Mm-hmm. So when you were scaling this, what was kind of your approach to convincing other schools to take this on? Were you showing them like, hey, this is how much, the focus that these classes that we've already used this for have, it's much more increased. This is how much time the teacher kind of gets back. Like, how are you positioning GoGuardian when you were selling it to schools to scale it?
I think the history and the story of GoGuardian's growth is ultimately a consequence of what I would describe as product-led growth. So this is less about us having like a vocal sales force that's constantly talking to school districts, talking about the proposition and so on, and instead about building a product that works really, really well, that's easy to set up, that directly solves schools' problems. And as a consequence of that, teachers and IT administrators and really all of our users were just constantly talking about how incredible of a tool this was to not just people within their district, but to other districts as well. And so probably the first $20 million of revenue or so that GoGuardian generated was purely as a consequence of this like this viral word of mouth growth. And so I think that, I mean, we talked to so many investors back in those times, and the consistent feedback that we got from everybody was like, why are you building a business in K-12? There's like, it's impossible to generate revenue. The budgets are small. It's the sales process are elongated and so on. But I think we cut through all of that noise simply by building something that the stakeholders in the education system found to be really useful at doing the core thing that they're responsible for, which is delivering quality educational experiences to kids. And so that element of solving a real problem really well in a space that has a tremendous amount of need, that I think is absolutely invaluable and worth more than any sales conversation that you might be able to have.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Advait from like the teacher perspective of the benefits that they can get from GoGuardian. You said earlier when you were young, you were playing games and doing things like this on your in the computer lab. Do you think have you heard from students that this is something that they really like and has been really beneficial? Like what's kind of been the student perspective that you've seen? I'm sure some of them have had increased productivity, but have they really been taking a liking to it?
Yeah, the reaction from students is what you might expect. If they're in a situation where their school experience is sort of boring or frustrating, it's natural for them to want to resort to sort of distracting themselves and doing what kids want to do, which is just have fun, right? So I can't say that students themselves are huge fans of the fact that GoGuardian exists, but on the other hand, we've built a number of tools in the learning space, like a lot of content and curriculum and assessment and practice tools as well. And the response that we've gotten from students has been overwhelmingly positive on that front. In particular, our most recent product that we've developed is called Pair Practice. And it really revolves around creating an amazing practice experience for kids where there's tons of gamification and the experience is just really, really engaging and it's social in nature within the classroom. And students are just fanatically in love with that experience because it's just so much fun and so engaging compared to maybe the experiences that they would have without devices or without technology. So that's the sort of direction we're headed as a company. We see ourselves as the students in the classroom and want to make an experience that's not just fun, but as a consequence of being fun, actually really effective in terms of practicing and learning and so on. And I think we're at the earliest stages of the potential on that front, let's say.
Interesting. So how do you view this balance between technology and the traditional teacher in the room? Like do you kind of see it as you guys are going to facilitate keeping the students being focused while the teacher can teach? Do you view your GoGuardian as moving more into what you just mentioned previously, like this providing more educational types of experiences? Like how do you think this balance for you guys will progress? Like where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's a pitfall to think about technology as this sort of silver bullet solution that solves all problems. Instead, I think we see technology as playing an important role in the educational experience, specifically creating this kind of engagement and helping students understand concepts, really personalizing experiences, and so on. And as a consequence of doing that, enabling the teacher to do what they're actually uniquely good at, which is creating genuine human connection in the classroom, and enabling students to do projects and developing social emotional learning. These are things that a computer will never be able to do. But if we can use the computers to sort of enable students to reach a state of baseline proficiency through personalization, then teachers can then leverage that baseline proficiency to deliver experiences that build off of that, that are uniquely human and absolutely necessary, we would say, to the full flourishing of what it means to be a human learner.
So, just a bit of a different topic. Like, what in terms of scaling, we talked about it a little bit. What would you say have been like the fundamentals of the success you've had in terms of scaling to nearly 1 in every 2 students in the U.S.? Is it because the product itself it sells itself? It's a really great product. Is it because you solved the niche that not many people are in? The team that you've created, like, what would you say were like 2 or 3 of the fundamentals that have really led to this type of success?
Yeah, I would say there's an aspect of this which is perhaps even higher level, which is building a culture of people that are just overtly passionate about this problem that we're seeking to solve. A group of people that sees, again, themselves as the learners in the classroom and sees so much potential to improve educational experiences for the world, and is just so excited about the consequences of doing that, and the rippling effects of these students then going out and entering into the world and solving the world's problems. Like that's the kind of people that work at GoGuardian. And as a consequence of having people like that are just so focused and passionate about these problems, I think you get to the sort of second order things that result in a business being successful. So that would be products that are incredibly easy to use, or salespeople that just relate to teachers and administrators in a way that's super caring and so on. And sort of business operations that enable the company to scale reliably. And I wouldn't say all of that stuff has been easy to build, but it's certainly been easier, and perhaps a consequence of the fact that we have so many people that are so passionate about the problems that we're seeking to solve.
So it's really the team is the most important thing that everything comes from.
100%. The team, and specifically the culture, like the way, the ultimate motivation for why people are on the team is the most critical. And then from there, the specific behaviors that people have in terms of being experimentalists or caring so much about the end user, or being super accountable for the results that they're responsible for. All of these more soft, like cultural aspects, I think are by far the most important things, and everything else I think is a consequence of the culture.
So, I mean, you were leading, the team in the CEO role. You decided to switch and come to a different role. Like, why did you feel like now was the right time? And, what do you want to accomplish in this new role you're in?
I think it happened as a consequence of an honest reflection of who I am as a person, which is I would probably describe myself as a product person or an engineer, and a realization that at this level of scale, where we're serving 1 and 2 students, that the CEO role really requires somebody that thrives in this kind of scaled environment. Whereas I see myself as much more of an early stage product developer, and that's something that I'm particularly excited about in the context of GoGuardian again, to step back into that role, because I just see so much potential for continuing off of this thread of creating incredible, engaging learning experiences. Again, I would say that we're still at the earliest stages of that as a society and as a company. And so just an honest reflection of that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I'm really good at. And the opportunity to find myself again in a role where I can do that full time, it was just sort of obvious as I started to process it all.
So how did you kind of go about figuring, who is the best person to take over in that role? And how do you also ensure that, the company can be innovative and really be nimble and innovate in the way that you just mentioned before at the size it is?
I think first it was an honest appraisal of why have we been successful as a company. And again, it's these elements of culture and intention around purpose. These are the sort of intangible things that need to be in place. And we felt that we really needed to bring on a CEO that fully represented these values and saw them as equally obvious as we did. And I think beyond that, the sort of more mechanical aspects of, hey, we needed a person with experience at scale that really understood some of the challenges that we're experiencing at this point in our story, and so on. But to me, those felt like table stakes. Those more mechanical aspects and these initial like cultural intention, purpose aspects are a little bit more subtle to tease out. But luckily we found that person in Rich Priest, and he started last week actually, and he's already been just creating so much excitement and optimism in the company of continuing to build where we've left off over here. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. So, I mean, AI now, Advait, has become such a big deal, and especially with you guys in the position you're in, there's probably a lot of interesting ideas in AI that you're thinking of. Like, what are some of the directions that you want to be able to go in, and could you share from a product standpoint what you're thinking of creating?
I think there's this really simple idea in education, which is um, we need to deliver educational experiences to students based on their current level of proficiency, regardless of what that level might be. And if you think about it structurally, we haven't really designed the K-12 system in that way, in the sense that if you're in second grade math, you're learning second grade math concepts, regardless of whether your proficiency is at fourth grade or even earlier than that. And as a result, students, for the most part, are pretty frustrated, whether they're ahead or behind. And that frustration, I think, compounds on themselves, where if you're behind, you'll likely end up being more behind. And I think things like the pandemic really exacerbated that. And so what we see in AI is an opportunity to make huge progress on this problem, and specifically make progress by delivering personalized and what we call differentiated. So kids having differentiated experiences based on their proficiency. And that's a pretty challenging problem because first you have to be able to identify their level of proficiency at the level of many skills. Like they might be proficient in math, but they might actually be struggling at specific forms of reading comprehension or vice versa. And so honing in on your understanding of proficiency is a critical prerequisite. And then from there, based on their understanding, you need to then deliver a personalized or differentiated experience. And now with AI, I think we have the ability to actually generate that experience on the fly and generate it in a way that's really hyper personalized to that student and where they live and what their interests are and what their proficiency levels are. It seems clear to me that those elements are critical to actually enable personalization. And then as a consequence of that personalization, will drive more engagement and hopefully better outcomes, specifically by taking the student from not understanding a specific concept to hopefully then immediately understanding that concept. And if we do that over and over and over again, I feel very confident that we'll be able to almost fully solve this problem of students being really far behind. And as I was mentioning earlier, as students catch up, then we can sort of take for granted that students will be at a baseline level of proficiency as they enter into the class period the next day. And then the teacher will be able to build off of that with really incredible in-person experiences instead of having to figure out how to handle a classroom where the students are many grade levels apart in terms of their baseline proficiency. So we see AI as a major lever, not just in terms of understanding where students are at, but then using that understanding to hyper personalize learning experiences. And if you fast forward 5 years or 10 years from now, it seems very clear to me that this is going to be the structure of how kids learn going forward. And I think GoGuardian is going to play a major role in that story in the years to come.
So you think like AI is going to be incredibly disruptive in terms of ensuring that there's a baseline, there's a pace that each individual can be on, they can be at a certain baseline level. And you also kind of see it going forward, like AI will enable students to also excel in certain areas that maybe can be more catered to them. So like customized learning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Like so far, you can imagine like students being assigned math textbook homework where everybody solves chapter 2A odd problems from number 11 to 23. Like everybody remembers being in school. And it's kind of silly to think about every kid having the same exact homework experience, because if I ask a student a few questions, I should be able to pretty quickly conclude, hey, they understand this. There's no need for them to practice. Or maybe the opposite, like they really don't understand this. And so asking them to continue to answer the same type of question over and over is actually really frustrating for them. And so this kind of adaptivity where we're able to quickly come to a conclusion about understanding and then change the experience based on that understanding so that it's actually in their sort of zone, their sweet spot where it's sort of perfectly challenging for them, regardless of what their level of proficiency is. That's the kind of experience that it should be obvious to everybody is going to be more effective and engaging. And that's sort of squarely in line with what we're trying to build here at GoGuardian today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all the questions that I had, Advait. I appreciate you coming on. Definitely excited to see you in this new role and what you're going to be able to accomplish from more of a product level with AI. I think there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot of things that can be done in that space, but customize opportunities and ensuring that every student doesn't get left behind and can really achieve a certain level with what you guys are doing. I think it's a great vision to have. So I'm excited to see what you do next and wish you much success. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Ben. This is great.